In this video, I will show how to create a simple report story on our incentive outcomes. And this can be used both during and after a review process. So for this particular video, we're going to use data from a total compensation template, but we're only going to look at the incentive tab within this template. So you could also actually use just a regular variable pay plan template that doesn't have total comp. So within Report Center, first we're going to create a new story report, which will open up our story reporting tool. And we're first going to create our query. So from the available data pane here on the right, we're going to select compensation planning. We're going to navigate down to the template I want to use, which is this total compensation template. And I'm going to drag across the template table. From the template table, we're going to connect our worksheet table. And the system requires us to select one column from the worksheet, even though we're not actually going to use this. So we'll select document ID. And then we're going to link the employee entry table, which is the most important table, the table that has most of our data coming from the incentive plan template. So from here, we're going to select a few columns, and we want to select any dimensions that we're going to use to slice or dice the data by. We're also going to select the employee information. Oops. So we'll select employee, first name, last name, user ID, and then I'll just go through here and select some of the dimensions that I want to use. So I'm going to use country, department, division. We'll take geozone. And then I'm also going to select some of the fields that are our measures. So incentive payout percent. Legal entity, local currency code, organizational payout, and then those final fields, which are our total incentive payout and our total prorated target. So your fields might be slightly different than this depending upon which dimensions that you're using, but typically the standard fields around individual or organizational payout should be the same. Of course, variable pay is highly configurable, so some of the calculated fields that I'm using might be different than what's available in your template, but we are following the leading practice total compensation template to build this report off of. So the last table that I want to link here is to pull through our overall performance rating. So again, we're going to see what available tables I can link to the employee entry. We're going to go down to the rating info. And from here, there's a whole lot of ratings available because this is a total compensation template. But the one I'm after in this particular circumstance is coming from the incentive plan template, and it's just called performance rating. All right. So that should give me all my standard fields here. As we always do, we'll save as we go. So we're going to save our data query. We're going to call this, we'll call it 2022 incentive outcomes. Okay, once the story is named or saved, we will have to create some custom calculated fields in order to build the story that I want to build today. And we'll probably go back and forth a little bit to preview the query to make sure that those calculated fields are coming through as expected. So we're going to click on the Create Calculated Column icon. And first, of course, we see all those standard fields that we've selected. So usually I have a quick look here, see if anything needs to be renamed or made a measure when it's a dimension. It all looks okay here, except for performance rating really is going to be a dimension. So I'll change that. And we'll save. And then we'll go back in and we'll actually create some calculated columns here. So there's 5 calculated columns I want to create for this report. First of all, I want to be able to show the total incentive spend and budget in our functional currency. So we'll do that first. Then we're going to create a field called percent of target, which is going to give us a like-for-like comparison field. And then we're going to create the categories for those percent of target, and then there's something we need to do around our performance rating field. So let's get started here. We'll create our first column, and I can copy these over. So the first one's going to be our total spend in US dollars. So how much did we spend on the incentive plan? And this is going to be our total incentive payout divided by our currency conversion rate. So that'll take everybody that's in different currencies than US dollars and convert them to US dollars for the purposes of the report. Just check the format and that looks okay. So that's our first one done. Our next one is going to be what our total target was, or also sometimes our budget in US dollars. So this is going to look at our total prorated target and divide that by the currency conversion rate. Okay, really simple formula to get that value. So the next one we're going to use quite a bit in our query, and it's something that we like to call a percent of target. So this is how much of an individual employee's target incentive was actually paid out. So it's a measure that's often used to remove any monetary discrepancies, such as some employees having really high target amounts or being paid in different currencies, and gives us a way to provide an accurate like-for-like comparison. So this one we'll call a percent of target. And the formula is going to be our total incentive payout divided by our total prorated target. And when we get to the story, we'll convert this to a percentage. All right, the next one is going to be a percent of target category. So we're going to look at our percent of target. Now we assume that anybody who has 100% of target is being paid their target amount. And we're going to categorize that. So we're going to say, okay, who was paid above target, who was paid below target, and who was paid at target. So there's 3 categories that we're going to look at. Of course, you could add more if you wanted to. Now this is going to be an if statement formula. So we're going to say if our percent of target is less than 1, then we want to return the words below target. But then we're going to say if the percent of target is greater than 1, then we're going to say that the employee is above target. Otherwise, we're going to assume they're being paid at target. Okay, so we'll just check that formula. Yep, and the format is okay. And we'll click OK. So that's our 4 calculated columns. I'm just going to click OK here, and we're going to preview our query to make sure that those values look okay. And then we'll create one more calculated field around the incentive performance rating. Okay, so we've got our query preview here. So let's start with our fields in functional currency. So we've got our total spend and total target in US dollars. Those look okay to me. Got our percent of target showing here. And if I scroll all the way over to the left, I can see the percent of target category. So we expect anything above 1 to say above target, which it does. I'll scroll down and we see these ones showing as below target. So I'm happy with the way that that looks. So the last thing that we want to look at here is our performance rating. So you can see the numerical value here coming through for performance rating. And the thing that we have to be a bit cautious of is that if an employee is unrated, such as this one here, the value comes in as this negative number, which doesn't look very nice on our dashboard. So we're going to write one more custom formula that takes these values and just converts it to a string field so that we can use the word unrated here instead of that value. So we'll go back in here to create our last calculated column. Now, this last calculated column formula is a little bit of a long one. I'm just going to call this field incentive rating. And we're going to write quite a long if formula here. So we're going to say if the performance rating is less than 1, then we want to return the words unrated. But then we'll say if the performance rating is less than 2, then we want to return the number 1. Now you could replace the number 1 with the wording of your performance rating as well if that made more sense for your organization. I might just speed ahead in the video in this one because it's going to be the same. So we'll fast forward this bit for you. Let's just check the format here and make sure everything looks okay. So it's less than 1, unrated. Okay, that looks okay to me. System's telling me that it's valid. So we'll click OK and OK. We'll save here again and we're going to go back and preview our query. So this time we just want to check to see if that incentive rating pulled through as expected. Okay, so we can look at this new field incentive rating that we created that is a string field, and usually we just do a quick comparison between performance rating and incentive rating. So the numerical values look fine to me. We'll just find, yeah, here we go. So these values here are now showing as unrated. So we can use this incentive rating field as a dimension when creating some of our widgets. All right, so that's our query complete. So we'll finish the query. We can save the data source. I'm just going to call mine employee entry incentive. And now we can look to start to actually build our story. All right, so we're on the canvas. The first thing that we're going to do is create a new responsive page. I don't think we need the default page. Delete that. And we'll get rid of these 2 responsive canvas sections, and I'm also going to get rid of this title too. So we just start completely from scratch. Okay. Now the first thing that we're going to do is create some numeric points that can sit up at the top of our canvas here and can show those calculated fields that we did. So we'll add a new chart. We get the designer pane opening here on the right hand side, and we're going to do a numeric point, and we're going to do a really simple, just a count measure. Now the count measure is here by default, but it's not actually a counter of all employees or a head count. It's really eligible employees. So I'm going to rename this to eligible employees. Okay. So in this particular example, we've got 120 eligible employees. Move this around, and I'm going to get rid of the primary. There we go. Okay, so we just have one that says eligible employees. Okay, let's add another numeric point. And this time we're going to pull through total spend in US dollars. So we'll take this one, we want to format this one slightly. I'm just going to get rid of the decimal places. So in our styling pane, we'll make that 0. And same thing as before, we're going to hide that one label. Okay, so that's our total spend in US dollars. Now we want to be able to compare that to the total prorated target. So we'll add another chart here, another numeric point. This time we're going to make it total target in US dollars. And again, we'll remove the decimal places. Okay, so really easy, a few numeric point values here, eligible employees, total spend, total target. We're going to add one more, which is going to be a calculated measure. And this calculated measure is going to be the difference between the total spend and the total target. So we're going to call this percent of target spent. Oh, we need to make this a numeric point as well. And now we want to actually display this as a percentage. So if we come over here, click on the Format button, we'll uncheck this box down at the bottom, and that should give us the ability to make this a percentage. And then we can see that we actually overspent from the total target by 147%, which is quite significant. Get rid of the subtitle there as well. Okay, so some really quick and easy bullet points here. We can also, if we'd like, put in a variance measure that looks at what is the difference between the total target and the total spend. So we can do that if we want to see how much we overspent by. We can go here, select to compare to, and open up that variance panel. And we can compare the total target to the total spend. Okay, so we need to change this value here to total spend in US dollars. And then really easy, we can see what the difference is here as well. So a good way to compare. Now I'm going to save this again, just because we always save as we go. And we'll look at creating some other widgets in this particular chart. And really what I want to focus on is sort of two measures here. The first is going to be that percent of target measure and looking at the averages. And the other one is going to look at the individual percentage outcome. So we're going to add another widget here. We'll add another chart. And I'm going to put it underneath these charts. And we're going to make this one a bar column chart, which it is by default. And we're going to add a measure here, but it's going to again be a new calculated measure because I want to look at averages here. So we're going to do an aggregation. We'll call this average percent of target. So this is the aggregation that we're going to use in order to pull through the average percent of target. So taking each individual employee's percent of target and averaging them. Okay, so this is the average over the whole organization. I don't love the look of that one, so we're going to make it a vertical chart. And we're going to add a dimension to this, so we don't just see of the whole organization, but we actually see it by, let's do country in this case. So now we can see across the countries listed on the bottom, what is the average percent of target. And again, I think that looks formatted a little bit better as a percent. So we're going to, over here on the measures menu, click format. uncheck the box at the bottom and add percentage there. Okay, so now we can see our average percent of target by country. Now I can update this title if I'd like, but I think it's okay. I can always just make it bold using a keyboard shortcut as well if I think I need to. So the next one we want to look at is a distribution heat map. So we're going to add another chart, and we're going to move this chart next to the bar graph. And this time we're going to look at one we haven't looked at before, which is distribution heat map. And what we want to see is the average percent of target by performance rating and division so that we can identify any anomalies here. So we are going to add, on our x-axis, we are going to add our incentive rating. And on the y-axis, we are going to add our division. And then under the color menu, that's where we put our measures in this case. So again, we're going to use the average percent of target. Make this a little bit bigger so we can read it. We have quite a few divisions here, which make it a little bit more difficult to read, but essentially what you can see is the darker colors, the higher the percentage. So what this graph is showing us that for a performance rating of 1, this was the payout percent, or the average payout percentage based on target for these 3 divisions. So given that in most scenarios, if you have a performance rating of 1, you normally don't get an individual component payout. We would assume in this particular plan, these 3 divisions performed for the business component of that plan. And that's something that you'd want to validate depending on what your outcomes were for your incentive plan. So that's our heat map. The last one that we're going to look at here for percent of target is going to be a bit of a pie chart, or a donut chart it's called. And we're going to use that custom field that we created around target category. So the measure that we're going to use is our count measure, or how many eligible employees are there. And our dimension is going to be that field that we created called percent of target category. And what this is going to show us is within our organization, how many employees were paid above and below target. Now in this particular example, I don't have any employees that were paid exactly at 100% of target, but if I did, we'd have a third category there. So maybe we'll just update the titles. Average percent of target by division and incentive rating. And this donut one is going to be eligible employees by, let's just call it target category, so it's nice and simple. Okay. So there we have 3 really quick and easy charts in different ways in which we can analyze the average percent of target outcomes. All right, so now I want to look at a different measure. This measure is going to be our individual percentage. So individual percentage is often used to evaluate an employee's individual achievement, and it will not include any sort of business or organizational outcome. So typically we see that split. All these average percent of target inclusive of the business outcome. The next widgets that we'll create are going to be excluding the business or organizational outcome. And some of them we can use the category, or the ones here from above. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to create another bar graph, but we're going to change things up a little bit here. So we're going to remove the measure that's in there, and we're going to add a new measure. Again, an aggregation. This one's going to be our average individual percent. And we're going to use the standard field individual payout percent. So for this one, instead of using country, let's change the dimension here. We'll make it incentive rating. And we're going to also reformat that percentage again to be a proper percentage format. There we go. So this is another good measure when we're talking about our individual percentage payout. So we're comparing it to the overall performance rating, which usually includes both the what and the how, whereas sometimes our individual percentage is just the what. So we can have a good comparison here as well. And that title, I think, is fine. Just make that bold. I think we're going to do another heat chart. So we'll copy this one again below and we'll make some amendments to it. So instead of the percent of target, which we'll remove, we're going to do that individual. We'll have to change the title accordingly. So you can reuse some of these charts. Once you've done the formatting and everything, it's quite easy just to copy it over and change a few things. When we look at this heat map, again, we really would expect that somebody with a 1 performance rating would also have a 0 outcome. But if we didn't, we could identify really easily some anomalies here and what business unit they belonged to. So the last one that we're going to do here, again, strictly around that individual percentage, we'll add one more chart. This is going to be another bar chart, but this time we're going to use it as a horizontal bar chart. And this is a good way of sort of identifying, who are our top performers or by our individual percentage outcome. So the dimensions that we're going to add to this are actually going to be the user ID, the employee's first name, and the employee's last name. And our measure is going to be our individual payout percent. So when we add those, we actually get quite a large bar chart with everybody that would be included. But what we're only interested in is the top. So we're going to look at the menu items here, and we're going to use the rank feature. And we're going to click the bottom one here that says top N options. And we're going to make it top 10 options. And what that's going to do is actually sort this graph to only show us the top 10 individual payout percentages. So we can actually see the ranking here. And so I'm just going to change this title so we can see exactly what it is. And we're going to call it the top 10 individual. Okay. All right, so again, really easy information here, but our dashboard isn't quite complete. We sort of need to add a little bit more of the detail in here, so a header, a logo, that sort of thing. We also want to add a page filter. So I'm going to go through and add the logo and the header here quickly. We'll fast forward that piece and then we'll show you how to add the page filter for this particular dashboard. Instructions here, we have our logo, we have our header. Now we're going to add a page filter. So click on the input control. We'll move the page filter underneath our instructions. and we're going to select a dimension, and we're going to use country in this particular circumstance. So I want all countries to be available in this filter, so I'll select all members. And then we just need to drag down our page filter so that we can see all the countries that are available. Now when we do this, if we want to filter the entire dashboard by a particular country, we can do that. So I might just select USA and we'll see everything that is on the chart here filter accordingly. Okay, so if country is not applicable to your organization, you could use any dimension that you wanted to filter the data by. And lastly, I think it's helpful for the end user to have a little bit of help text here. So what I like to do is add any additional information underneath that page filter. So I'm going to add some help text that I prepared earlier. We'll put it over here. And this help text is really just going to explain to the end user, what is percent of target, what is individual percentage. Okay, so some help text there for our end user. I'm going to save my dashboard and then we'll have a quick look at it. I think it's looking pretty good there. I'm happy with that. I think I'll probably make this title bold. I could also make these bold if I wanted to, but those are just cosmetic changes. Okay. So the other thing that I do want to do for this incentive outcome is create a second page here. And that second page is just going to have a detailed list for us if a user just wants to see all the data that comes into this particular report. So we're going to rename page 1 just as report. And we're going to add a second responsive page here. And we're going to call it detailed list. Again, I'll just delete this. Now, all we're going to add to this second page is one table. It's just going to be a really standard table. And we're just going to pull through all the possible information that might be relevant to our end users. We'll expand that to be as big as we want it to be. I'm going to get rid of the count because I don't think that is relevant, and I might move some of these fields around. Okay. Good. I think that looks good. Gives us a little bit more information if we want to drill down a little bit deeper. So we'll save that. And that is our completed video on how to create an incentive outcome report using either a total compensation template with the incentive data only, or using a variable pay template on its own. Hope that was helpful.